Clara Johnson, a diligent housekeeper in her mid-30s, had always prided herself on her keen observation skills. These skills were put to the test one sunny afternoon as she watched Sophia Mitchell, the wife of billionaire Ethan Mitchell, engage in yet another hushed conversation with a mysterious man. This wasn't the first time Clara had noticed these clandestine meetings, but something about this particular encounter sent a chill down her spine. The man, tall and imposing with a scar running down his left cheek, leaned in close to Sophia, his lips barely moving as he spoke. Sophia's usually composed demeanor seemed slightly frayed, her manicured nails tapping nervously against her designer handbag. As Clara dusted the nearby windowsill, she strained to catch snippets of their conversation. Words like transfer, offshore, and untraceable floated on the air, setting off alarm bells in Clara's mind. As the man departed, disappearing into a black SUV with tinted windows, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was brewing. She had worked for the Mitchells for 5 years, and while Sophia had always been distant and somewhat cold, this level of secrecy was unprecedented. Driven by a mix of loyalty to her employer and an innate sense of right and wrong, Clara decided to approach Ethan Mitchell with her concerns. The next day, she found him in his study, poring over financial reports. "Mr. Mitchell," Clara began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I need to speak with you about something important." Ethan looked up, his steel gray eyes meeting hers. "What is it, Clara?" Clara took a deep breath and launched into her observations. She detailed the frequent visits from the scarred man, the hushed conversations, and the snippets of suspicious dialogue she had overheard. As she spoke, Ethan's expression shifted from polite interest to skepticism. "Clara," he said, leaning back in his leather chair, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Sophia has many business associates, and not all of them are conventional." Clara pressed on, describing the nervous energy she had sensed from Sophia and the odd words she had caught. Ethan listened, his brow furrowing slightly, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. "I'll look into it," he said finally, his tone making it clear that he considered the matter closed. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention." Disappointed but not deterred, Clara left Ethan's study, determined to keep a closer eye on Sophia's activities. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the calm shattered by the sudden whir of helicopter blades. Clara rushed to her modest home's front porch, watching in disbelief as a sleek black helicopter descended onto her small lawn. The craft had barely touched down when a man in a crisp suit emerged, carrying a package wrapped in plain brown paper. "Clara Johnson?" the man called out over the noise of the rotors. Clara nodded, stunned. "This is for you," he said, handing her the package before retreating to the helicopter. As quickly as it had arrived, the helicopter lifted off, leaving Clara standing in her bathrobe, clutching the mysterious package. Her hands trembled as she tore open the wrapping, revealing a manila envelope stuffed with documents. The first page made her gasp. It was a photograph of Sophia, much younger, standing arm in arm with the scarred man Clara had seen visiting the house. Scrawled across the bottom in red ink were the words, "The past always catches up." As Clara leafed through the rest of the documents, a pit formed in her stomach. Bank statements, offshore account numbers, and what looked like coded messages painted a picture of a vast criminal enterprise. And at the center of it all was Sophia Mitchell. Clara's mind raced. Who had sent this package? How did they know about her suspicions? And most importantly, what was she going to do with this explosive information? One thing was clear. Sophia Mitchell was not who she claimed to be, and Ethan's fortune, and possibly his life, were in grave danger. Clara realized that she was now entangled in a web of deceit that stretched far beyond the walls of the Mitchell estate. With this knowledge came a heavy responsibility, and Clara knew that her next moves would be crucial. As the sound of the helicopter faded into the distance, Clara made a decision. She would protect Ethan, expose Sophia's deception, and unravel this conspiracy, no matter the cost. Clara's hands shook as she carefully spread the documents from the mysterious package across her kitchen table. The manila envelope contained a trove of information that painted a disturbing picture of Sophia Mitchell's past. Bank statements showed large transfers to offshore accounts, while grainy surveillance photos captured Sophia in clandestine meetings with known criminals. One name appeared repeatedly throughout the documents: Nick Sullivan. A quick online search revealed him to be a former business tycoon who had vanished from the public eye 5 years ago amid rumors of fraud and money laundering. In several photos, Nick stood beside Sophia, their body language suggesting a close relationship. Clara's mind raced as she pieced together the implications. Sophia, it seemed, had a long history with this criminal figure, a history she had carefully hidden from her husband, Ethan. The documents hinted at a complex scheme involving embezzlement and identity theft, with Sophia playing a central role. As Clara absorbed this shocking information, she heard a car pulling into her driveway. Peering through the curtains, she saw Ethan Mitchell stepping out of his sleek black sedan. Her heart pounded as she quickly gathered the documents, shoving them into a drawer just as a knock sounded at her door. "Clara," Ethan said as she opened the door, his face etched with concern. "I've been thinking about what you said. I need to know more." Clara hesitated, torn between her duty to her employer and the weight of the secrets she now carried. Finally, she stepped aside, allowing Ethan to enter. "Mr. Mitchell, there's something you need to see." Over the next hour, Clara carefully presented the evidence she had received. Ethan's expression shifted from disbelief to anger, to a deep, palpable sadness as he confronted the reality of his wife's deception. "I can't believe this," Ethan muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "How could I have been so blind?" Clara watched him, her heart aching for the pain she saw etched on his face. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. I know this must be incredibly difficult." Ethan's jaw clenched as he stood, a newfound determination in his eyes. "I need to confront her. I need to hear the truth from Sophia herself." As Ethan left, Clara felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She had done what she believed was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a dangerous game. Meanwhile, at the Mitchell estate, Sophia paced in her private study, her phone pressed to her ear. "Nick, we have a problem," she hissed. "Someone's been digging into our past. We need to act fast." Nick's gravelly voice came through the line. "Calm down, Sophia. Who knows what?" "I'm not sure, but I think it's the housekeeper, Clara. She's been watching me, and I've seen her talking to Ethan." "Then we need to eliminate the threat," Nick replied coldly. "You know what needs to be done." Sophia's eyes hardened as she ended the call. She had come too far and sacrificed too much to let a nosy housekeeper ruin everything. As she heard Ethan's car pulling into the driveway, she quickly composed herself, ready to face whatever accusations might come her way. Ethan burst into the study, his face a storm of emotions. "Sophia, we need to talk." Sophia plastered on a concerned smile. "Darling, what's wrong? You look upset." "Don't darling me," Ethan growled. "I know about Nick Sullivan. I know about the offshore accounts, the fraud. How long have you been lying to me?" For a moment, Sophia's mask slipped, revealing a flicker of panic before she regained her composure. "Ethan, I don't know what you think you know, but I can explain everything." As Sophia launched into a web of half-truths and misdirections, Ethan felt his world crumbling around him. The woman he had loved and trusted for years suddenly seemed like a stranger. While this confrontation unfolded, Clara sat in her small house, unable to shake the feeling that she had set something dangerous in motion. She double-checked her locks and drew her curtains, all too aware that she had made herself a target. What Clara didn't know was that at that very moment, Sophia was already putting plans in motion to silence her. As night fell, a dark figure slipped into Clara's backyard, ready to eliminate the threat to Sophia's carefully constructed world of lies and deception. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change all of their lives forever, with loyalties tested, secrets exposed, and the true nature of trust and betrayal laid bare in the harsh light of truth. The following evening, Clara and Ethan met in secret at a small, dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town. Both looked haggard, the weight of recent revelations evident in the dark circles under their eyes and the tension in their shoulders. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Mitchell," Clara said, her voice low as she glanced around the nearly empty cafe. Ethan nodded, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "Clara, I need to know everything. No more holding back." Taking a deep breath, Clara began to unravel the complex web of Sophia's past. She explained how her research had revealed a pattern of deception, stretching back years before Sophia had even met Ethan. Sophia Reeves, that was her maiden name, grew up in a middle-class family in Chicago, Clara began. But she always craved more. She started small, manipulating her way into wealthy social circles, but it wasn't enough. Clara went on to describe how Sophia had met Nick Sullivan at a charity gala 7 years ago. Nick, already a successful businessman with a reputation for cutting corners, saw in Sophia a kindred spirit, ambitious, cunning, and willing to do whatever it took to get ahead. "They became partners, Mr. Mitchell, in business and in crime," Clara said, her voice tinged with disgust. "They ran elaborate cons, targeting wealthy individuals and corporations. Sophia would charm her way into their lives, gather inside information, and Nick would use it to manipulate stocks or orchestrate takeovers." Ethan listened, his face a mask of pain and disbelief. "But why me? Why did she marry me if she was already successful in her schemes?" Clara's eyes softened with sympathy. "You were the ultimate prize, Mr. Mitchell. Your wealth, your connections. Marrying you gave Sophia access to a world she could only dream of before. And it provided the perfect cover for her and Nick to expand their operations." As Clara continued to share her findings, Ethan's shock turned to anger. He had been nothing but a pawn in Sophia's game, a means to an end. The love he thought they shared was just another lie in Sophia's tapestry of deception. While Clara and Ethan were engrossed in their clandestine meeting, Ethan had begun his own investigation. Using his considerable resources and connections, he delved deeper into Nick Sullivan's background and current activities. What he uncovered was alarming. Nick, it seemed, had not been content with mere financial fraud. His operations had expanded into more dangerous territories: arms dealing, money laundering for drug cartels, even human trafficking. And Sophia, whether Ethan wanted to believe it or not, was deeply implicated in all of it. Ethan's private investigator had managed to trace recent communications between Nick and Sophia, revealing plans for a massive operation that would dwarf anything they had done before. The centerpiece of this plan appeared to be a charity gala Sophia was organizing, set to take place in just 2 weeks. "It's not just a gala," Ethan explained to Clara, his voice tight with urgency. "It's a front for something much bigger. They're planning to use my connections to bring together some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the country. But for what exactly? I'm not sure." Clara's mind raced, connecting the dots. The investors Sophia's been courting for her new business venture. They must be part of this plan. Ethan nodded grimly. "Whatever they're planning, it's going to happen at that gala. We need to stop them, Clara. But we can't go to the authorities yet, not without concrete proof. Sophia's too well connected, too careful. We need to catch her in the act." As they sat in the quiet cafe, formulating a plan to unravel Sophia and Nick's scheme, neither Clara nor Ethan realized the danger they were in. Sophia, always one step ahead, had noticed Ethan's unusual behavior and and Clara's furtive glances. She knew they were onto her, and she was not about to let years of careful planning go to waste. In her lavish home office, Sophia placed a call to Nick. "We need to accelerate the timeline," she said, her voice cold and determined. "And we need to deal with a couple of loose ends, permanently." As night fell over the city, the stakes of this dangerous game continued to rise. Clara and Ethan, united in their quest for truth and justice, were unaware that they had just become targets in a deadly plot. The countdown to the gala had begun, and with it, a race against time to uncover the truth and stop a criminal enterprise that threatened to shake the very foundations of their world. The day of the gala arrived, bringing with it a palpable tension that hung in the air like a storm about to break. Clara and Ethan had spent the past 2 weeks meticulously planning their strategy to expose Sophia and Nick's criminal operation. Clara adjusted her elegant black dress, feeling out of place in the borrowed finery. As a housekeeper, she was used to blending into the background, not mingling with the city's elite. But tonight, she had a crucial role to play. "Remember," Ethan murmured as they approached the grand hotel where the gala was being held. "We need concrete evidence. Get close to Sophia if you can, but be careful. She's dangerous." Clara nodded, her heart pounding. She was to pose as a wealthy investor, using a false identity Ethan had procured. Her mission was to get close to Sophia and, if possible, overhear any incriminating conversations. As they entered the opulent ballroom, Clara was momentarily overwhelmed by the glittering chandeliers, the soft music from the string quartet, and the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of what was at stake. Ethan squeezed her arm reassuringly before moving off to mingle, playing the role of the unsuspecting husband. Clara watched as he approached Sophia, who was holding court near the bar, looking stunning in a form-fitting red gown. Clara circulated the room, ears straining to catch any snippets of suspicious conversation. She noticed several men who seemed out of place, too alert, too watchful to be mere party guests. Security, she realized, or perhaps enforcers for whatever deal was going down tonight. As the evening wore on, Clara managed to position herself near Sophia, pretending to be engrossed in a conversation about art investments with another guest. From the corner of her eye, she observed Sophia's behavior, noting how the woman's gaze kept darting to her diamond-encrusted watch. Suddenly, Clara noticed a change in Sophia's demeanor. The hostess excused herself from her group and began moving purposefully towards a side door. Without thinking, Clara followed, her heart racing. In a deserted hallway, Clara pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear Sophia's hushed phone conversation. "Everything's in place," Sophia was saying, her voice tense. "The transfers will begin at midnight. Make sure your people are ready." As Sophia ended the call and turned back towards the ballroom, Clara's mind raced. Transfers? What exactly was going to happen at midnight? She needed to warn Ethan. Slipping back into the crowded room, Clara scanned the area for her employer. She spotted him near the stage, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with a group of men she didn't recognize. Clara began making her way towards Ethan, but before she could reach him, the lights dimmed and Sophia took the stage. The room fell silent as Sophia tapped a spoon against her champagne glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sophia began, her voice smooth as silk, "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Your generosity will make a real difference in the lives of those less fortunate." As Sophia launched into her prepared speech, Clara's eyes darted between the hostess and Ethan. She needed to get his attention, to warn him about what she'd overheard, but how could she do it without arousing suspicion? Just then, Clara noticed something that made her blood run cold. Nick Sullivan, the man from the photographs, had entered the room. His eyes scanned the crowd before locking onto Sophia, a silent message passing between them. Clara's instincts screamed that something was about to happen. The midnight deadline Sophia had mentioned was less than an hour away. Whatever criminal scheme they had planned was about to unfold, right here in this room full of unsuspecting guests." As Sophia's speech reached its crescendo, Clara made a split-second decision. She had to act now. Consequences be damned. She began pushing her way through the crowd towards Ethan, determination etched on her face. But before she could reach him, a strong hand gripped her arm. Clara turned to find herself face-to-face with one of the men she had pegged as security earlier. "Miss Johnson," the man said quietly, his grip tightening, "I'm afraid you'll have to come with me." Clara's heart sank as she realized her cover had been blown. As the man began to lead her away from the crowd, she caught Ethan's eye across the room. In that brief moment of eye contact, she tried to convey everything: the danger, the urgency, the need to act. As Clara was escorted out of the ballroom, she could only hope that Ethan had understood her silent message. The clock was ticking, and the fate of everyone in that room hung in the balance. As Clara was led away from the bustling ballroom, her mind raced to piece together the fragments of information she had gathered. The lavish gala, she now realized, was more than just a cover for Sophia and Nick's illegal activities. It was the centerpiece of their entire operation. The security guard guided her through a maze of corridors, finally stopping at an unmarked door. As they entered, Clara found herself in what appeared to be a makeshift command center. Computer screens lined the walls, each displaying scrolling numbers and complex financial data. "Well, well," a familiar voice drawled. "I should have known you'd be trouble from the start." Clara turned to see Nick Sullivan lounging in a chair, his scarred face twisted in a smirk. Sophia stood beside him, her earlier charm replaced by cold fury. "I have to admit, I'm impressed," Sophia said, circling Clara like a predator. "A simple housekeeper, yet you managed to uncover what teams of investigators couldn't. It's almost a shame we have to silence you." Clara's heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain calm. "This isn't just about fraud, is it? What are you really planning?" Nick chuckled darkly. "Oh, it's much bigger than that, my dear. Tonight, we're not just stealing money. We're rewriting the rules of global finance." As Nick spoke, Clara's eyes darted around the room, taking in the computer screens. She began to understand the true scale of their operation. The gala wasn't just a front. It was a trap. Each of the wealthy guests had unknowingly brought their personal devices, now connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi. With access to these devices, Sophia and Nick could initiate transfers from hundreds of bank accounts simultaneously. "In less than an hour," Sophia explained, a hint of pride in her voice, "we'll execute the largest financial heist in history. Billions will be siphoned from accounts around the world, laundered through a complex network of shell companies, and disappeared without a trace." Clara's mind reeled at the implications. This wasn't just theft. It was an act that could destabilize entire economies. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Ethan was growing increasingly anxious. He had seen Clara being led away and knew something had gone wrong. As Sophia's speech drew to a close, he noticed Nick slip back into the room, whispering something in Sophia's ear. Ethan's instincts told him time was running out. He needed to act, but he was surrounded by guests and potential accomplices. How could he stop whatever was about to happen without putting everyone in danger? As if on cue, Sophia's voice rang out over the speakers. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, I have a special announcement. If you could all please take out your phones, we have a surprise digital auction about to begin." Ethan watched in horror as the guests, oblivious to the danger, eagerly reached for their devices. He knew he had to do something, and fast. Back in the command center, Clara was desperately trying to think of a way out. She noticed one of the guards glancing nervously at his watch. Whatever was about to happen, it was imminent. Suddenly, an idea struck her. It was risky, but it might be her only chance to alert security and stop the heist. "You won't get away with this," Clara said, injecting a note of confidence into her voice. I've already alerted the authorities. They're on their way now. She saw a flicker of doubt cross Nick's face. Sophia, however, remained impassive. Nice try, Sophia sneered. But we've planned for every contingency. In a few minutes, it won't matter anyway. But Clara's bluff had the desired effect. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably, his hand moving towards his radio. In that moment of distraction, Clara made her move. She lunged for the nearest computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she tried to trigger any kind of alarm or alert. Chaos erupted in the room as guards rushed to restrain her. In the ensuing struggle, Clara managed to hit a series of keys before being pulled away. Alarms blared throughout the building, and the screens in the command center flickered and went dark. "What have you done?" Sophia screamed, her composure finally cracking. As security personnel flooded into the room, drawn by the alarms, Clara caught a glimpse of Ethan bursting through the door, his face a mix of relief and determination. The carefully orchestrated plan was unraveling, but the night was far from over. With the authorities on their way and panic spreading through the gala, Clara and Ethan found themselves at the center of a storm that threatened to expose long-buried secrets and shatter countless lives. The blaring alarms shattered the elegant atmosphere of the gala, plunging the ballroom into chaos. Guests looked around in confusion, their conversations giving way to worried murmurs and panicked questions. In the midst of this mayhem, Clara found herself being roughly handled by Nick's security team, her arms pinned behind her back. "You've ruined everything," Sophia hissed, her carefully cultivated poise crumbling as she advanced on Clara, eyes blazing with fury. But before Sophia could reach her, Ethan intervened, placing himself between his wife and the housekeeper. "That's enough, Sophia," he said, his voice cold and firm. "It's over." Sophia's eyes darted between Ethan and Clara, realization dawning on her face. "You," she spat at Ethan. "You've been working with her, haven't you? How long have you known?" Ethan's jaw clenched, long enough to know that our entire marriage has been a lie. As this confrontation unfolded, Clara noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. Nick Sullivan was inching towards one of the still functional computers, likely attempting to salvage what he could of their operation. Clara knew she had to act fast. "Security!" she shouted, her voice carrying over the din of the alarms. "That man is Nicholas Sullivan, wanted for fraud and embezzlement." Her cry caught the attention of the hotel's security team, who had just burst into the room. Nick, realizing he was cornered, made a desperate lunge for the exit, shoving guests out of his way. In the ensuing commotion, Clara managed to break free from her captors. She rushed to the nearest computer terminal, determined to find concrete evidence of Sophia and Nick's crimes before they could destroy it all. Meanwhile, Ethan found himself locked in a bitter confrontation with Sophia. "How could you do this?" he demanded, years of pain and betrayal evident in his voice. "Was any of it real?" Sophia's laugh was hollow. "Oh, Ethan," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "You were always so naive. Do you really think a woman like me could love someone like you? You were a means to an end, nothing more." Her words struck Ethan like physical blows, but he stood his ground. "You'll pay for this, Sophia. For all of it." As they argued, the room descended further into chaos. Guests were being evacuated, security personnel were struggling to maintain order, and in the background, the persistent wail of approaching police sirens could be heard. Clara, her fingers flying over the keyboard, managed to access the system's core files. "I've got it," she called out to Ethan. "All the evidence, it's right here." But her triumph was short-lived. One of Nick's men, a burly security guard who had evaded the hotel staff, charged towards her. Clara braced herself for impact, but at the last moment, Ethan tackled the man, sending them both crashing to the floor. "Clara, run!" Ethan shouted as he grappled with the guard. "Get that evidence to the police." Clara hesitated for a split second, torn between helping Ethan and securing the crucial evidence. Making her decision, she grabbed a nearby USB drive, quickly downloading as much data as she could. As she worked, she saw Sophia making a break for the exit. "Stop her!" Clara yelled, but Sophia was too quick, slipping out of the room amidst the confusion. Just as Clara finished the download, a new wave of commotion swept through the room. Police officers poured in, their authoritative voices rising above the chaos. "Everybody freeze! Police!" In the sudden hush that followed, Clara found herself face to face with a stern-looking detective. She held out the USB drive, her hand shaking slightly. "Here," she said. "This is everything you need to know about Sophia Mitchell and Nick Sullivan's criminal operation." The detective took the drive, his eyebrows raising, as Clara quickly explained the situation. As she spoke, she saw Ethan being helped to his feet by another officer, a bruise forming on his cheek, but determination still burning in his eyes. For a moment, their gazes met across the room. In that look, they shared a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and the grim satisfaction of a job done, albeit at great personal cost. But even as the police began to restore order and gather statements from shell-shocked guests, Clara couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. Sophia was still out there, and Nick's whereabouts were unknown. This wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. As the detective led her away for questioning, Clara cast one last glance at the chaos they had unleashed. She had a feeling that this night was just the beginning of a much larger storm. The following hours passed in a blur of police statements, witness interviews, and the constant buzz of activity as law enforcement combed through the evidence Clara had uncovered. The grand ballroom, once a scene of opulence and hidden corruption, now resembled a high-stakes crime scene, with forensic teams meticulously documenting every detail. Clara found herself seated in a makeshift interrogation room, a hastily repurposed office within the hotel. Across from her sat Detective Sarah Reeves, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. "Ms. Johnson," Detective Reeves began, her pen poised over a notepad. "I need you to walk me through everything again, from the beginning." As Clara recounted the events leading up to the gala, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had prevented a massive financial crime, but at what cost? And with Sophia still at large, the danger was far from over. Meanwhile, in an adjacent room, Ethan was facing his own interrogation. The gravity of his situation, being married to the mastermind of a criminal enterprise, was starting to sink in. His world had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. "Mr. Mitchell," the interrogating officer pressed, "you expect us to believe that you had no knowledge of your wife's illegal activities until recently?" Ethan's voice was hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "I know how it looks, but I swear I had no idea. Sophia, she was very good at keeping secrets." As the night wore on, the hotel lobby became a hive of activity. Police officers coordinated their efforts to track down Sophia and Nick, while forensic accountants began the monumental task of unraveling the complex web of financial transactions. Suddenly, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. Nick Sullivan, his face bloody and his expensive suit torn, was being dragged in by two burly officers. "We found him trying to board a private jet at the airstrip just outside the city," one of the officers reported. Detective Reeves quickly moved to confront the captured fugitive. "Nicholas Sullivan, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes," she stated firmly. Nick, despite his disheveled appearance, managed a smirk. "You've got nothing on me," he spat. "And good luck finding Sophia. She's probably halfway across the world by now." As Nick was led away, Clara couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. Sophia was still out there, and she was arguably the more dangerous of the two. The interrogations continued well into the early hours of the morning. Clara, exhausted but determined, provided every detail she could remember. Each piece of information could be crucial in building a case against Sophia and Nick. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the hotel windows, Detective Reeves called Clara and Ethan into her makeshift office. "We've managed to piece together most of the puzzle," she informed them, gesturing to a board covered in photographs and connecting lines. "But there's still something that doesn't add up." She pointed to a series of transactions that didn't fit the pattern of Sophia and Nick's other illegal activities. "These transfers, they're different. It's almost as if there was a third party involved." Clara and Ethan exchanged puzzled glances. Who else could be involved in this scheme? Just then, a junior officer burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Detective, we've got a lead on Sophia Mitchell." A traffic camera picked her up, heading towards the industrial district. Detective Reeves sprang into action, barking orders to assemble a team. As she prepared to leave, she turned to Clara and Ethan. "You two stay here. You've done enough, and it's not safe out there." But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, something they were all missing. As the detective left, Clara turned to Ethan, determination etched on her face. "We need to figure out who this third party is," she said firmly. "It might be the key to understanding Sophia's entire operation." Ethan nodded, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "I've been such a fool," he murmured. "But you're right. If we can uncover this last piece of the puzzle, we might be able to bring this whole thing crashing down." As they bent over the financial records, poring over every detail, neither Clara nor Ethan realized that their actions had set in motion a chain of events that would lead them to a truth far more shocking than they could have imagined. The real mastermind behind this entire scheme was still hidden in the shadows, and the revelation of their identity would shake the very foundations of everything they thought they knew. The aftermath of the gala left a palpable tension hanging over the city. As news of the foiled financial heist spread, the public's appetite for details grew insatiable. Clara and Ethan found themselves at the center of a media storm, their faces splashed across newspapers and television screens. In the days that followed, Clara struggled to adjust to her newfound notoriety. Her small apartment became a fortress, besieged by reporters clamoring for exclusive interviews. She longed for the simplicity of her former life, even as she knew there was no going back. Ethan, for his part, faced a different kind of scrutiny. As the husband of the now infamous Sophia Mitchell, he was subjected to intense speculation about his involvement in her crimes. Despite being cleared by the police, the court of public opinion was less forgiving. One gray afternoon, Ethan arrived at Clara's apartment, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. "I can't thank you enough, Clara," he said as she ushered him inside. "If it weren't for you, who knows how much damage Sophia would have done." Clara nodded, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "I was just doing what was right," she replied softly. "But Ethan, how are you holding up?" Ethan's shoulders sagged as he sank into a chair. "It's been difficult," he admitted. "The board is pushing for my resignation. They say the company can't afford the negative publicity." Clara felt a pang of guilt. Her actions, while necessary, had upended Ethan's life in ways she hadn't anticipated. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. This isn't fair to you." "No, don't apologize," Ethan said firmly. "You did the right thing. It's just, I've lost everything. My marriage, my career, my reputation. I'm not sure where to go from here." As they talked, Clara found herself seeing Ethan in a new light. Behind the polished exterior of a successful businessman, she saw a man grappling with betrayal and loss. It stirred something in her, a desire to help, to protect. "You haven't lost everything," Clara said, surprising herself with the intensity in her voice. "You still have your integrity. And you have me. I mean, as a friend," she added quickly, feeling a blush creep up her cheeks. Ethan looked at her, a spark of something gratitude, affection in his eyes. "Thank you, Clara. That means more than you know." As the days passed, Clara and Ethan found themselves drawn to each other, united by their shared experience and the weight of the secrets they carried. They began meeting regularly, poring over the evidence, trying to piece together the full extent of Sophia's operation. But even as they worked, Clara couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. She found herself looking over her shoulder, jumping at unexpected noises. The knowledge that Sophia was still at large gnawed at her, a constant reminder that the danger hadn't passed. One evening, as Clara was returning home from a meeting with Ethan, she noticed a car parked across the street from her apartment. As she watched, the driver, a woman with long dark hair, seemed to be staring directly at her. Clara's heart raced as she fumbled for her keys, nearly dropping them in her haste to get inside. Once safely in her apartment, Clara's mind raced. Was it Sophia? Had she come back to seek revenge? Clara's hand shook as she reached for her phone to call Ethan. But as she dialed, another thought struck her. What if her growing feelings for Ethan were clouding her judgment? Was she letting herself get too close to a man who, until recently, had been married to a criminal mastermind? Clara's finger hovered over the call button as she wrestled with her conflicting emotions. She was drawn to Ethan. There was no denying that. But was it genuine affection, or just a result of the intense situation they had shared? As night fell over the city, Clara stood by her window, watching the street below. The mysterious car was gone, but the unease remained. She realized that in exposing Sophia's crimes, she had opened a Pandora's box of complications, both personal and professional. Clara knew that the coming days would require all of her strength and resolve. The battle against Sophia's criminal empire was far from over, and now she had to navigate the treacherous waters of her own heart as well. As she finally turned away from the window, Clara steeled herself for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that the choices she made now would shape not just her future, but Ethan's as well. As weeks passed, the initial frenzy surrounding the gala incident began to subside, but the ripple effects continued to shape Clara and Ethan's lives in unexpected ways. The city had settled into an uneasy calm, with Sophia's disappearance becoming the stuff of urban legend and wild speculation. Clara found herself struggling to return to her old routine. Her job as a housekeeper seemed trivial now, almost laughably mundane compared to the high-stakes drama she had been part of. She tried to lose herself in the familiar rhythms of cleaning and organizing, but her mind constantly wandered to unanswered questions and potential dangers lurking around every corner. One crisp morning, as Clara was mechanically dusting the shelves in her small apartment, a knock at the door startled her out of her reverie. She opened it to find Ethan standing there, a determined look on his face. "Clara," he said, his voice filled with an energy she hadn't heard in weeks. "I've been thinking, you can't go back to being a housekeeper, not after everything you've done, everything you're capable of." Clara blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" Ethan stepped inside, his eyes alight with excitement. "I'm starting a new company, a security consulting firm, and I want you to be part of it. Your instincts, your attention to detail, they're exactly what we need." For a moment, Clara was speechless. The offer was tempting, a chance to use her skills in a meaningful way. But doubt crept in, whispering reminders of her limited education and lack of professional experience. "Ethan, I don't know," she stammered. "I'm not qualified. I don't have the right background for something like that." Ethan shook his head emphatically. "You're more qualified than anyone I know. You uncovered a massive criminal operation that fooled some of the best minds in finance. That's worth more than any degree." As Ethan laid out his vision, Clara felt a spark of excitement ignite within her. It was a chance to rebuild, to create something positive out of the chaos they had endured, but it was also terrifying. a leap into the unknown that would take her far from the safe, predictable life she had always known. "I need time to think about it," she said finally, her mind whirling with possibilities and fears. Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course, take all the time you need. But Clara, don't let fear hold you back. You're capable of so much more than you realize." As Ethan left, Clara found herself standing at a crossroads. The path forward was unclear, fraught with potential pitfalls, but also brimming with opportunity. She thought about her life before the gala, the quiet routines and modest ambitions. Was she ready to leave that behind? Over the next few days, Clara grappled with her decision. She found herself making pro and con lists, researching the security industry, and even visiting a career counselor. But in the end, it wasn't logic or careful planning that swayed her. It was the memory of the thrill she had felt when piecing together Sophia's scheme, the satisfaction of making a real difference. A week after Ethan's offer, Clara called him. "I'm in," she said simply, her voice steady with newfound resolve. Ethan's joy was palpable even through the phone. "You won't regret this, Clara. We're going to build something amazing." As they began the process of setting up the new company, Clara threw herself into learning everything she could about the security industry. She took online courses, read industry journals, and picked the brains of experts Ethan introduced her to. With each passing day, her confidence grew. But even as Clara embraced her new path, a part of her remained vigilant, always watching for signs of Sophia's return. The shadow of their unfinished business loomed large, a constant reminder that their story was far from over. One evening, as Clara was leaving the office space they had rented for their fledgling company, she caught a glimpse of a familiar face in the crowd. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought it was Sophia. But as quickly as the figure appeared, it vanished into the sea of commuters. Clara stood frozen on the sidewalk, her heart pounding. Was her mind playing tricks on her? Or was Sophia closer than they thought? As she hurried home, Clara knew that no matter how much her life changed, no matter how far she came from her days as a housekeeper, the past would always be with her. She was stepping into a new chapter, one filled with promise and potential. But the echoes of the gala night, the unanswered questions, and the lingering threat of Sophia's return would continue to shape her journey in ways she was only beginning to understand. The revelation hit Clara like a thunderbolt, shaking the very foundations of her world. As she stood in the dimly lit warehouse, surrounded by stacks of incriminating documents, the truth she had uncovered seemed almost too incredible to believe. Nick Sullivan, the man they had been hunting, the supposed mastermind behind the financial crimes, was her long-lost brother. Clara's mind reeled as she pieced together the fragments of her past. Memories of a troubled childhood, a family torn apart by poverty and desperation, came flooding back. She remembered a young boy, fierce and protective, who had promised to make their lives better before disappearing one stormy night. That boy had been Nick, and in his misguided attempt to fulfill his promise, he had fallen into a life of crime. "Clara," Nick's voice echoed through the warehouse, tinged with a mix of desperation and relief. "I never thought I'd see you again." Clara turned to face him, her emotions a turbulent mix of anger, confusion, and an unexpected surge of familial love. "Why, Nick? Why did you do all this?" Nick's scarred face contorted with remorse. "I wanted to give you the life you deserved, but I got in too deep, made deals with the wrong people. By the time I realized how far I'd fallen, it was too late." As brother and sister stood face to face, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the air. Clara knew she had only moments to make a decision that would change everything. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan was piecing together his own shocking discovery. Poring over financial records in their office, he had uncovered a trail that led to an unexpected conclusion. Sophia had been working for a shadowy organization far more powerful and insidious than they had imagined. His phone buzzed with an urgent message from Clara. "Warehouse District, come quickly. Everything we knew is wrong." As Ethan raced through the city streets, his mind grappled with the implications of what he had learned. The scope of the conspiracy was far greater than they had ever suspected, reaching into the highest echelons of power. Back at the warehouse, Clara faced the most difficult decision of her life. Nick, her brother, the missing piece of her past, stood before her. A criminal, yes, but also a victim of circumstances and his own misguided intentions. "Clara, please," Nick pleaded, his eyes darting towards the sounds of approaching law enforcement. "I know I've done terrible things, but give me a chance to make it right. Help me expose the real culprits behind all this." Clara's mind raced. Could she trust Nick? Was this another manipulation or a genuine plea for redemption? And what of her loyalty to Ethan, to the life they were building together? As if summoned by her thoughts, Ethan burst into the warehouse, his face a mask of shock as he took in the scene before him. "Clara, what's going on?" he demanded, his eyes darting between her and Nick. In that moment, with sirens wailing ever closer and the weight of secrets threatening to crush her, Clara made her choice. She turned to Ethan, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Ethan, there's something you need to know. About Nick, about Sophia, about everything we thought we knew." As Clara began to explain, the warehouse doors burst open, flooding the space with harsh light and the shouts of police officers. Time seemed to stand still as Clara, Ethan, and Nick faced the consequences of their intertwined fates. In that frozen moment, Clara realized that the story she had thought was ending was only just beginning. The truth about Nick, the revelations about Sophia's connections, and the depth of the conspiracy they had stumbled upon would reshape not just their lives, but potentially the entire world. As handcuffs clicked and questions flew, Clara caught Ethan's eye. In his gaze, she saw a mix of confusion, hurt, and a fierce determination that mirrored her own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The warehouse faded into a blur of activity as Clara was led away for questioning. Her mind raced with the magnitude of what lay ahead. A battle against a hidden enemy, a chance to right long-standing wrongs, and the delicate balance of loyalty, love, and justice. As the police car pulled away, Clara looked back at the warehouse, now swarming with investigators. She knew that this night marked not an end, but a beginning. The real fight, for truth, for redemption, and for a future free from the shadows of the past, was only just beginning.